So I've been doing a lot of polls on my community tab recently, and it seems like a lot of you really wanted to see some easy meals from a plant-based pantry. Now I had to rack my brain quite a bit because making a full meal is not something I'm usually pretty good at. But then I started thinking about some of my favorite things to make. I love making seitan. You can turn it into so many different things. I really like making tacos because you can make tacos from just about anything. And I really like making pasta. I think homemade pasta is really incredible, and it's actually really easy to make. So when I said pantry staples, I really meant it. I'm gonna be using some of my pantry staples, which are flour, a can of San Marzano tomatoes, I love these, and some chickpeas. Now, these are just basic pantry staples. I'm hoping that you guys have some seasonings, but for the most part, we're gonna be making these things very basic. So let's go ahead. We're gonna be using the 3 ingredients, the 3 stars of the show to make 3 different plates. This is gonna be really cool. Now, when somebody's talking about making seitan, 90% of the time, they're gonna be talking about making it from Vital wheat gluten. Now, Vital wheat gluten is pretty easy to come by, but in today's times, you might not have this in your pantry, but you probably do have a bag of flour. Now today I have 2 different kinds of flours here. I have an all-purpose flour. We're gonna be using this later, but for the seitan, I'm gonna be using a bread flour. Now you can use all-purpose flour. You just get a little bit better yield out of using bread flour because there's more gluten in bread flour. If you only have all-purpose flour, follow the exact same instructions and you're gonna be able to do the same thing. So to make seitan, it's pretty simple. I'm gonna use 2 cups of bread flour and then 1 cup of water. All we're gonna do is we're just gonna mix the flour and water together and form a dough ball. I'm just gonna drop a little bit more flour here on the cutting board. And then we're just gonna knead this until we have a nice firm dough ball. So at this point, I'm gonna take this dough ball, throw it into the original container here, and we're actually gonna cover it with cold water. So the cold water is gonna allow the gluten to kind of firm up and bind together and kind of really hold its place, while also allowing the starches to kind of start washing away from the gluten. We're just gonna leave this go for about an hour maybe, and then we're gonna come back and finish off the rest of the seitan. So now let's move on to our tortillas, our flour tortillas to make our tacos, our seitan and chickpea tacos. For this, I'm gonna be using the all-purpose flour. I'm gonna do a pretty hefty pinch of salt. Now I'm gonna use some olive oil. If you have some shortening, that works. If you have any other like coconut oil is gonna work. Really any other sort of oil is really gonna work. If you're in a bind, you can replace pretty much all of the water and oil in the recipe with chickpea water. I have some oil on me, so I'm gonna use a little bit of oil. I'm gonna use about a tablespoon of olive oil and then just a 1/3 cup of water. Then we're just gonna mix these guys together and mix them pretty well. And then just lightly flour your work surface, turn your small little dough ball out onto the surface here. Now, I will tell you guys, I am just doing everything very small batch. There's no need to waste right now. This is only gonna make about 4 tortillas, maybe 5 tortillas, maybe 6 tortillas, not very many tortillas. If you're doing this at home, just double up the recipe, do however much you need. So at this point we have a nice smooth dough ball. I'm just gonna cover this up with a wet towel. We're gonna let this sit for about 10 minutes, just let it rest. We're gonna let the gluten rest. This is gonna make it a heck of a lot easier to turn it into some tortillas. So it's been about 10 minutes. I just greased up a cast iron skillet, set it on a pretty medium-high heat. At this point, all we're gonna do is just take this dough ball, I'm gonna kind of roll it out into a small log and cut it into 5 pieces. And then those 5 pieces, I'm just gonna roll into small ping pong ball sized balls. And starting with the first one, just give it a nice good press and just use our small rolling pin and roll it into a disc. And all we're gonna do is just pick these guys up and then throw them right into your hot cast iron skillet. And we're just gonna let them cook for just a minute on each side, real quick. And now we have our tortillas, which these things are amazing. It only takes, total 15 minutes, most of it being waiting time. So I'm gonna cover these guys up and let's move on. We're gonna make some really easy, fresh pasta. So again, with the pasta, the main ingredient is flour. We're gonna be using 2 cups of flour for this. And again, I'm cutting this recipe pretty much in half. We're just gonna make a little volcano of flour here. So in total, we're gonna be using about 2/3 of a cup of water. I'm gonna start with 1/3 of a cup of water and just kind of slowly pour it in, mixing in the sides until it's all kind of like evenly mixed together and we have a pretty flaky combined dough. Now at this point, once we have pretty much the dough combined, we have a nice little dough ball here. We still have a bunch of extra flour. We're gonna bring this in and then just a little at a time, we're gonna start adding more water, combining more flour to this ball. And you're only gonna do maybe a teaspoon at a time. So at this point, we have a really nice dough ball. I'm gonna essentially just cut this into 8 even pieces. I'm gonna take these pieces, I'm just covering up with a wet towel, and then all I'm gonna do is just roll this one out into a thin, not noodle, but just like a log. Now, if it's resisting on you, just let it rest for a minute. We're gonna make it just about as long as our cutting board can go. And then all we're gonna do is just take our knife, cut off a small piece, and then press working towards us, and we should make a little disc shape. It should be almost like a shell. Honestly, if you make a decent looking shape, be pretty proud of yourself. So at this point, we have our taco shells made. I have all of my pasta sitting here. It's lightly floured. Let's finish up with the seitan. This has been sitting in a nice cold bowl of water. This dough ball is really soft. All we're gonna do is kind of just knead it in the water here, and you're gonna see the water get very milky. Now at this point, I'm gonna take this over to the sink because we're gonna rinse this out and start squeezing out all of the starch and just have remaining the gluten. This is gonna be really neat. So we ended up washing the gluten until the water started to run clear. You're left with a piece of stringy, just pure gluten. At this point, all we're gonna do is kind of like squeeze out most of the water, kind of press as much air as we can. I'm just gonna season this up to use in my tacos. So you can see there's not a whole lot here. You're only gonna get about half of the flour that you use. I'm gonna season this with my chicken stock flavor. Now this is a vegetarian chicken flavor broth. I'm not gonna use a whole lot of this. I'm just gonna kind of pinch it in and work it into the seitan here. You can season it however you want, whatever seasonings you have. Then I'm gonna wrap this guy very tightly in a piece of parchment paper. And we're just gonna set this in our steamer pot, let the guy steam for 30 minutes. We're gonna come back and finish all these meals. The rest of this is gonna be really easy. I'm gonna slice it up into small slices. Whew, it is hot. Now, this meat would be just like any other sort of like plain chicken breast at this point. Not seasoned, not really like beyond just the chicken seasoning. It's really wild how well seitan works as a meat replacement. So for the chickpea, we're gonna use every part of the canned chickpea for this recipe. We're gonna use the liquid of the chickpea, which is called aquafaba. And we're gonna make like an aquafaba sauce, which is gonna go on our tacos. Now you can use any sort of oil you like. I like olive oil. You don't have to use olive oil. You could just blend this up how it is. I'm gonna just drop in a few drops of lime, not much. We're gonna start this on just a slow blend, and then we're just gonna add some olive oil to it, which should emulsify into a really nice consistency, real nice creamy consistency. Has kind of like a nice cheesy taste to it. This is really good. Now I'm gonna use half the chickpeas for my tacos. Hopefully you have some good seasonings. We're gonna use some cumin, chili powder, and garlic powder. Now I'm also gonna season my seitan the same way, and I'm just gonna do all of the seitan the same way. Give them a little hit of some olive oil. And all we're gonna do is just heat up a skillet and give these guys a quick cook. They're gonna be so good, so good. So I just threw my pasta in some boiling water. That's gonna take about 5 or 6 minutes to cook, being a thicker, fresh pasta. Now while these guys are cooking, I'm gonna pop open my tomatoes. I'm gonna just pop out 2 of these guys for my tacos here. I'm gonna give them kind of a quick chop. Then I'm just gonna take another small bowl. And all I'm gonna do is just give them a hit of garlic powder and some of that chipotle chili powder. And this is gonna be salsa to kind of throw on top of our tacos. Now we're gonna make some sauce for our pasta. I'm just gonna use the same pan. I'm gonna kind of turn down the heat just a bit. Now, if you have some onions or garlic, you can go ahead and throw that on. So now that that olive oil is nice and hot, we're just gonna throw the tomato sauce right down in the oil. I'm gonna throw in the remaining chickpeas. And we're just gonna let this simmer for just a minute before we throw in the pasta and finish off this dish. This is a really easy, simple, really good dish. And now that we have this simmered together for about 20 minutes, we just have to plate this up. I mean, look at this. This was literally just a can of chickpeas, a can of tomatoes, and some flour. I mean, and you have this beautiful, maybe not beautiful. I know like all of the Italian grandmas out there are like, that's not archetti, but it is a pasta and it is good. Come on. Baby, do you want to try this? It's really hot.
That's all I can do. Oh my God, it's delicious.
3 ingredient.
That's amazing.
Now, what about the tacos? Do you want to try a taco? Now, I mean, same thing. Now, I know the flour was the star of the show today, being with the seitan here and the chickpeas over here. The chickpeas didn't do much, but that little cream sauce that's on here is gonna give these like a nice cheesy taste that you would otherwise not get. I'm assuming you want the seitan
Yeah,
one.
I wanna try it.
Fold it up and take it, baby. I love these tortillas.
So good.
Chewy.
It's like the best seitan I've ever had.
Really?
Like ever.
When you make seitan from scratch, it is a huge difference.